We're going to try to add as much life as we possibly can to cash receipts and cash book. We probably will not be reading every slide verbatim. We will ask you that if you have any questions to put them in the chat. We will address the questions as they pop in the chat. So Beth, please alert us when the questions pop up. I think it's best to answer the questions when they come up while we're at the same topic. I have been treasurer collector. Actually, I've been town accountant for 10 years, and I've been treasurer collector for the last 22 years in the town of Medfield. And I look forward to spending the next 45 minutes with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Pilla. I'm the treasurer of the town of Milford. In my position for 7 years now. Prior to that, I've been the controller of a manufacturing company. And then prior to that, I was a controller of a construction company. Yeah, we're going to try to make this as not as boring as possible. Hopefully, a lot of the stuff relates to your everyday duties back in your own offices. And like Georgia said, if you have any questions, feel free to just jump in. So with that, we'll go to slide 1. So chapter 41, section 35. I'm not going to read the entire law. If you guys want to look it up, you can. Basically, this chapter says that every town treasurer shall give a bond annually for the performance of their duties. In my experience, for my office, I have a bond for my assistant treasurer, and I also have a bond for my administrative specialist, because they also are handling the cash and the checks that come into this office, and they do go to the banks as well. Roger, I don't know if you bond your staff.
Yes, I have a bond. Because I am treasurer and collector, I have a bond for treasurer. I have a bond for collector. And keep in mind that both of those bonds are very different because both positions handle different amounts of money. And when we go into the next slide, you'll see how it's calculated. Keep in mind too, that can change every couple of years as well. If you have a year where you have a bond issue and your revenue has come in, you need to update your bond because of that. Your auditors always take a look at that too, and they will always advise you whether or not you're too low and you need to increase your bond. My staff is also bonded as well because they go to the bank and they can't handle cash and they handle checks. Anybody handling cash or checks needs to be bonded. We also have a forgery bond in the office as well.
So along with being bonded, this section also talks about that the treasurer will take charge of all monies belonging to the town. So any cash or check for a fine, anything that comes into the town, the treasurer in his office or his or her office is responsible to make sure it's properly handled. They do this by rendering the true account of all the receipts and disbursements throughout the year. So we'll get into it further along in the PowerPoint, but there are reports and forms that the treasurer should do monthly, quarterly, and then they're required to do it annually with the state. Again, auditors do take a look at all these forms. They take a look at all these reports. They're looking at your cash books to make sure that you are accounting for everything coming into the town and going out of the town.
Any revenue, I mean, I always use the phrase that everybody's very familiar with, that the buck really stops at the treasurer's office. Any revenue that comes into the town of Medfield, whether it's a 50-cent library fine on an overdue book, whether it's a $10 license for a dog, whether it's a building permit, any revenue that comes into the town has to come through the treasurer's office. Keep in mind, you also need to take into consideration your student activity accounts. I know many towns, there's been a lot of discussion on student activity accounts. That also comes under the treasurer. So keep that in mind as well.
So this is the instructions on how to calculate your bond. Georgia was talking about that it's there's a specific grid to calculate it. It's on the next slide that I'll show you, but these are some of the requirements for just the treasurer. So they take into account all the retirement funds, all the trust funds, stabilization, the net amount to be raised by taxation, so your tax levy, and then estimated local receipts and any bond proceeds that they have. If you're a treasurer collector, you also then have to add on all the collectors requirements, which is the tax levy again, so it's the net amount that's kind of redundant, but then any uncollected real estate and personal property tax used for the fiscal year, for the prior fiscal years, and then any revenue collected from all sources of other taxes. So your boat excise tax, motor vehicle tax, any water sewer liens, you have to add all that in, and then to find out what your revenue is for the town. And then you can come to this, which is the second page of the DLS instructions. And this is where you'll get your minimum bond requirement. So for instance, my town, our annual revenues are between 50 and 100 million. I think we're right around like 76, 78. In between there, we fluctuate. So my bond for my personal stuff is 250. For my assistant treasurer, I don't have her at the same level as me. I have her bonded up to $1 million of revenue, which is 65,000. And then for my administrative specialist, I have her at a bond of 10,000. So that's what I do. Georgia, I don't know if you want to.
So I am right above you. I am at the 25 million to the 50 million. So I'm at the 200,000. And because my one assistant has the exact same power as I do, I have her bonded at the exact same amount, only because if something happened to me, the next day she would be able to function and she would be covered immediately.
And that brings us to chapter 41, section 46. This section is pretty much the first sentence is the key sentences. The treasurer shall be the custodian of all funds and securities of such trust funds. So anything, again, that's coming in to the town. So your local receipts, your real estate taxes, for the school, any student activity, any scholarships that are set up, you are the custodian of them. So you should have trust fund documents for all of them. Any land trust documents that you have, all these, any gifts that are given to the town, you're the custodian. And the treasurer should have all the trust funds for these, so he or she knows what can be expended and what can't be expended. These monies should be reinvested with in a pretty stable investment fund. So they're just pretty much earning interest and not losing money at any time, but they are gaining interest. In Milford, we have probably about 50 trust funds between scholarships and miscellaneous trust funds that were given to the town. And those trust funds, I believe my investment policy on that is 90-10, so 90% equity, and then 10% it goes into stock.
Mine is about 80-20, and a lot of people ask me, well, how do you know what goes into a trust fund? And my answer to them is, do you plan on spending the money anytime soon, or do you want to put the money away and let it grow? We have about 30 to 35. They can range from a cemetery perpetual care to scholarships, to gifts. A lot of times a gift can be a simple revolving account, but we have a couple of gifts that were over $200,000. Again, that is something, and per your trust fund document, you need to go through, you need to be very familiar with your trust fund documents. You need to know what's expendable, what's not expendable. You also need to be certain that the expenses that are submitted via the vendor warrant follow the guidelines in that trust document.
The next section is 4453. All these chapters and all these sections pretty much say the same thing. They just break it out further along. So this section is talking about when a city or town department or district officer turns over their money, the treasurer or the treasurer's department is required to put it into their revenue line item in their budget unless otherwise directed by a special act. So if the inspections department brings up building permits, that goes into the building permit line item in their budget. Unless otherwise designated at town meeting. For example, we have a medical marijuana facility here in town that has pledged to give us $1 million each year. We at town meeting took that $1 million and specifically earmarked it to go into stabilization. So when I get the check quarterly, that money goes directly into stabilization. We don't put it into any town budgets or anything. It goes directly into stabilization, and that came from town meeting, which is your legislative body to the town, or in the city, it's your city council. Move on. So that now we actually get into what is a cash receipt. So cash receipt is pretty much any money received by the town. So your permits, beach passes, school lunch, anything you can think of is considered a cash receipt. Those cash receipts are turned over to the treasurer or the collector through a departmental turnover. And there's some examples coming up that we can go over what exactly needs to be on a turnover and what a treasurer collector should look for and what their staff should look for. So do you have anything on
We
this?
can keep
No?
going. No, the only other item that I had under cash receipts that I mentioned before were the student activity accounts. And keep in mind that as the treasurer, usually student activity accounts is a checking account and a savings account. The treasurer is always a signer on the savings account and never a signer on the checking account. And I know that a lot of the auditors or any municipalities that have an audit of the student activity accounts, those are scrutinized. But again, you know, being a first or a second year staff person, once you set the rules and the regulations in the beginning, then thereafter, it's just so much easier. You need to set the ground rules first. Keep in mind your departmental turnovers too. Those can vary over time. And again, I mean, I have certain rules too. You can come in over the counter between 8:30 and 1, only because if they come in after 1 and they come in with, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 in cash, I don't like keeping it in my safe. Again, set your ground rules early and people will respect that.
And that's a good point. So every department or every town is going to have their different policies. Here we ask all departments to have their turnovers in by 2 o'clock each day. And we try to get to the bank within the hour after that if we have cash. We do have a check scanner here in the office. So if someone brings all checks, we will just scan it immediately if it's after 2 o'clock. But we do have a policy, a townwide policy that the turnovers are supposed to be in by 2 o'clock. And your treasurer and collector, they should set a policy that should be adopted by their select board and noticed by their select board so that every department knows the rules. Now, there's going to be some cases that, you know, someone comes in after, yeah, and you just got to handle that.
And that's fine, as long as, and everybody will have an exception. But if there's an exception, there should also be a phone call or an email saying, do you mind if I come in after 2 o'clock? Just so that you're able, you know, to have the time to count it if it is a lot of cash. And keep in mind, policies and procedures, the auditors go crazy over this. They love written policies and procedures.
So here's a sample of the turnover I use. It's actually, I'm gonna see if I can switch my screen. I have it. I thought I had it up. I guess I don't. Sorry, we'll just stay here. Sorry about that. So this is what I use. This is a PDF form. It's a fillable PDF. We ask for the number is each fiscal year the department should start over. So it would be 1. That's more for the department use, not our use. who it's coming from. So, for example, inspections and the date. So they should use the date they're turning over. In this section, it's from, we ask for the name in a check number if it's a check. The source is the general ledger account. So if it's going to be for building fees, it's going to be 2404110, and I'm just making up account numbers. And then whether it's cash or check, and then it totals for the department over here. So if they have 40 checks, some departments do list it on here. Others will say see attached, and they'll attach their own list, which is fine. But we're really looking for is the source and if it's cash or check. And then it totals down here. And this happens, the way we have ours set up is when they enter it into one, it automatically filters down into the town accountant's copy. So there's going to be a treasurer's copy and a town accountant's copy, and they should mirror each other. The only difference is on the town accountant's copy, the department head is signing. On the treasurer's copy, the treasurer will sign. So right here, I will sign. Now you, as staff personnel, they'll sign the treasurer's name and maybe initial it. Or if your treasurer wants, you can sign your name. It all depends on his or her policies. For my office, my staff signs my name, and I can tell by their writing which one's signing which. It's also date stamped by our office. So we have a stamp that reads treasurer's office, and it gives the date. The top copy is stamped, the top part over here is stamped, and then this is stamped because this portion right here goes back to the person that's turning over the cash receipt.
So in my office, my form is a little different. I don't think I sent it to you, Chris, to put in the slideshow, but that's fine. My form is a little different. Our first copy is the treasurer's copy, and the second copy is the town accountant's copy. And both copies have to be kept separately. You cannot make a change to the treasurer's copy and make a change to the town accountant's copy. You, as the treasurer, are not allowed to touch the town accountant's copy. At least that's my regulation in my office. What's very important, if you get anything out of this departmental turnover, is the segregation of cash and checks that come in over the counter in a total deposit. You must separate the cash and the checks on each departmental turnover. That is key. We also include the general ledger number, which makes it very easy for the town accountant. In my case, the town accountant enters the receipt. The treasurer's office does not enter the receipt into Munis. The totals will always match the deposit total that comes in from the bank. Other than that, what I'm a stickler on is that if somebody comes in over the counter, they are not going to give me the town accountant copy. That town accountant's copy is the town accountant's. And I do not want that town accountant copy coming to me. If there is a change in the deposit, the department head is responsible to go to the town accountant's office to make the change. I will not allow myself or my staff to make a change to both copies.
So
That again is for internal control.
right. So in my office, my staff enters the cash receipts into Infinite Visions, which is our software here. And the town accountant then posts it after he reviews it. I believe I have sorry. So I didn't put the town accountant's copy on here, but it mirrors the same thing like Georgia said, but sometimes they do ask for more information. Other times they have enough information on the cash receipt. Like she said, it shouldn't be altered. If it has to be altered, it should be given back to the department representative and fixed and then brought back up when it's all set. You shouldn't be changing. You shouldn't even see the town accountant's copy. I believe in the first year treasurer's course at the annual school for MCTA, when they do the cash and cash receipts class, the first thing they said is that they like to tell people not even to bring that piece of paper into their office. So there's no question that nothing can be changed or
And again,
a discrepancy.
when you set these ground rules and you have these procedures into place, people will become accustomed to them. And again, it makes sense. And it covers you. It covers you, your staff in your office, you know, from mistakes or from anything that can happen to a deposit.
And once someone
Go ahead.
and once someone brings in the turnover, they shouldn't leave, whether it's just checks or whether it's cash. Especially if it's cash, you should make sure that person is standing there while you count it again. Because if there is an issue, there's going to be absolutely no question that you did anything wrong or anything. Even I know checks, it's hard to change a check or whatever, but still they should watch you do it. Take your time, do it twice if you have to. Remember, you're representing your treasurer. So it's his or her name that's certifying this document and certifying that you're accepting the cash. So if there is an issue, you probably should let them know right away before signing it and then sending it back or sending the department on their way.
Yeah. Also, if a deposit comes in over your counter and you have your checks and you have your cash, obviously you're going to count your cash. Keep in mind, we had a deposit a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if anybody can zoom in on it. Our DPW was selling transfer station stickers. They accepted this $100 bill. Clearly, right on the bottom here, it says play money. Person didn't realize it, brought it in over the counter. We caught it during the deposit. It definitely does not feel like a $100 bill. And it clearly doesn't look like one either. So you almost have to train your eyes. Remember, you're not just sitting there and counting. You have to, feel, you got to look. Does it look differently? As far as your checks, I know my bank is a stickler. If it's not made out to the town of Medfield, or if it says Park and Rec or Medfield Library, they're not going to accept it. They're going to take it, they're going to send it right back to me. Make sure it says Town of Medfield. And again, that is part of your policies and your procedures. Your department heads or anybody making these deposits need to know what the game rules are. And as the treasurer, you are the ones that is setting the game rules. And you do that early on, you're not going to have any problems with your players. They're all going to play the same game and the game is going to be played fairly.
So what should be considered on a turnover? What should a turnover include? The name of the department, the date of the turnover, the list of payments made, description, ledger account, and the amounts, total of all items, the itemized cash and checks, the dollar value, and for what period, and then the signature of the department head or representative and the signature of the treasurer or representative. So I can tell you, we just finished up our audit last week here, and they do look at your turnovers. They do look to make sure that the cash and checks are broken up, and then they actually match it to the general ledger system and actually match it to the bank slip that you get to make sure that the cash that you took in that day matches the cash that was put into the bank and that was put into the accounting system. So we're not trying to make it difficult for the department. It's just checks and balances to make sure that no cash is going missing. For the checks, Georgia mentioned that it has to be made out to the town of Medfield. When I first started, our bank was pretty lenient. The checks could come in town of Milford, Milford Sewer Department, Milford Water Department, and they would accept them. Now we're seeing a big pushback back. If it's not made out to the town of Milford, they're not accepting it. They're sending them back to us. I'm not sure if that's on the Federal Reserve level that's pushing it back, but they are cracking down on that. We find that a lot at the schools. They'll make it out to Milford School Department.
The name of the
Milford School Department doesn't exist. They're part of the town of Milford. They are a department of the town of Milford.
Correct.
Milford cheerleading, that could be anything. It could be a town.
And if, right, and if the department head or whoever's making the deposit would ask me the question, well, why won't you take it? Because the check is clearly for cheerleading. And I say, because the account name at the bank does not say Milford Cheerleading, it says Town of Medfield.
Right.
So, or Town of Milford, I should say. So again, you need to understand their reasoning as well and understand where they're coming from. But again, set the ground rules early and you'll have no problems whatsoever.
So turnovers should be counted before the department head or representative leaves your office. Again, take your time. If it's a large one, count it twice. If you're making, you miss something, count it again. It's your time. You're the one who's in charge. You're going by your department policies and what your treasurer collector wants you to do. The individual cash and checks should equal the turnover. So if they're giving you $100 in cash, you should have $100 in cash. If you don't, you need to have them corrected. The turnovers should only be corrected by the departments. And then this is a big one. Departments should make their turnovers at least weekly, or even more frequent when the amount is large. In Milford, we have a problem with some of our departments. They don't like to turn it over weekly. For whatever reason, they're either too busy, they don't think it's a priority, or whatever the reason is. Audit did bring it up. We did put in place a departmental turnover policy, which establishes it has to be turned over at least weekly. Where they store the checks in cash is also a big issue. A lot of people, especially in my town, in different departments, think they can keep their cash and their checks in a desk drawer that just has a lock because it has a lock. Little do they know that it could just take a letter opener to pry that lock open and then it's gone. And then they would be responsible for it. So whether if $1 went missing or $1,000 went missing, they're responsible for it. And it's considered theft at that point on them, because there's no other way that we can prove, unless there's cameras all over the office, that that person didn't break in or take it.
And it can be anybody. We're not pointing fingers. It can be your cleaning people as well.
Right.
My answer to them is, I only know of 2 safes in the entire town. One is in my office and one is at the high school. So if you're not making a weekly deposit, then I know you're storing it in a file drawer or you're storing it in your desk drawer. And 95% of the time, neither of those 2 are locked. And if they are, you probably don't remember where the key is.
So not only is that a deficiency in the departmental policies that the auditors will look at, it also brings in insurance. If something was to happen, say the whole town hall was broken into and a lot of stuff was stolen, and they come in and say, okay, where was this stored? And you say in your flimsy desk drawer with a lock, you're probably not going to get your insurance on that. They're probably going to exclude that. And you don't want that to happen, because ultimately it's going to come down to the department heads and most likely the treasurer collector, because the treasurer collector is
responsible.
He or she is responsible. We put this sample bylaw in. It's not really, it doesn't need to be accepted as a bylaw, but it probably should be accepted or added into any policy your treasurer collector department has. But I'll read it right out. It says, any department collecting funds on the behalf of the town shall transfer those funds directly to the town treasurer on a weekly basis. Any department collecting more than $1,000 in any period less than 1 week shall, upon reaching that amount, transfer those funds to the treasurer on a daily basis. Now, $1,000, I mean, some places could be 5,000, 10,000. I think this is a standard sample that we use in our school too, that says $1,000, but your treasurer collector could make it whatever amount they choose to. So, but that's what you should.
It's a starting point.
Yeah, it's a starting point, and you should advertise it to all your department heads that that's what your department wants.
Exactly.
All right, so we have a couple of scenarios that we'll run by you guys, and then we'll let you guys kind of jump in and see what your
They're quite
thoughts are.
obvious. We're not here to trick you. They're quite obvious. We need to add a little bit of humor to some of this material. Okay, go ahead, Chris. You can identify yourself.
All right. So I am the treasurer, and Georgia is the Parks and Rec director.
So I
they
come to
leave-
Chris,
yeah.
yep, and I have a deposit. I just collected my camp registrations for the week of 4th of July. So I give Chris my deposit. I have cash and I have checks. So I gave it to Chris. He happened to be at the counter that day, not his staff.
So I comment to Georgia and I say, your deposit is over $1,500. And she responds to me and says she doesn't have time to make these deposits and waits until it doesn't fit in her desk drawer anymore. So what should the treasurer or the treasurer's staff say to this department? Anybody want to jump in?
So you can either jump in, and if you
Yeah.
don't want to jump in, Beth, has anybody jumped in?
I don't see anything on chat, but do you want to, since it's a scenario, do you want to take it off of shared screen so we can see?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine. And anybody can jump in. Just yell it out. That's fine.
Yep.
There are a couple of issues that are wrong here in that scenario. So our first issue is that the deposit was over $1,500. If my rules and if my policy stated that it was 1,000, I'm giving him a deposit for 1,500. I left. I didn't stay there. I didn't have time to sit there and wait for him or his staff to count the cash and calculate the checks. And thirdly, I told them I don't have a safe. I put it in my desk drawer. So that's what was wrong with that situation.
Want to do the second scenario?
Yep.
Sure.
So I'm the library director. Hold on, I read it. So I come in with, my rolls of quarters because of all the fines and my 2 or 3 checks and my cash. And I'm not going to sit there and write the amount of the cash. So I just wrote $500. That's what it equaled. My 2 checks and all my rolls of quarters equal 500. So I gave it to Chris. That was my deposit.
As the treasurer, I reject this. And why do why am I going to reject this turnover?
Needs to be broken out.
That's right. It needs to be broken out. It needs to have the cash and the checks separated to equal the $500.
Mhm.
That was good.
And also in my policies and my regulations, do not come in over my counter with a Ziploc bag of coins, because I'm not going to sit there and roll them for you. I have paper rolls here. Please come by and pick them up and you can roll them yourself. We don't have the time to do that. And each department head should be responsible. Obviously, they're going to count it and roll it up. Okay, the third situation is I am the town clerk and Chris is the treasurer. I come in with a deposit, but I have to go chat with the town administrator. So I just drop the deposit off to Chris and I have to run upstairs and chat with the town administrator.
All right. Anybody want to jump in what they would do? All right. So what I would do in this situation is so we don't have a window, right, Paula? Don't allow them to leave. That's right. Without the deposit, correct.
But some department heads will say, but it's always right. Why do I have to
Right.
wait for you to sit there and count it? You're wasting my time.
So what I would do if this situation happened, if they came in, So we don't have a counter. We just have like the individual desks. If they came in and they put it on the person's desk and then walked out, I wouldn't touch it. I would just leave it there until they came back for the rest of they're eventually going to come back. If they don't come back within 5 or 10 minutes, call again, but make sure someone else is in the office with you so they can watch
While you
watch the
count it.
deposit.
Yeah.
Right. Say sorry. Those are the rules. Yep. Try to explain the rules to them. I think we have a
We do have
question.
a question from Allison. She asked, is anybody allowed, or do we allow anybody to make a deposit directly to our accounts? The only person that I allow to do this is the school lunch. And that was for obvious reasons prior to school bucks, because right now I required all online school lunch receipts. Very few cash comes in. I think with our 5 schools, I may have $80 a week that comes in on cash. And you would be surprised how much my school revenue went up. So other than that, and my ambulance, our ComStar deposits do go in automatically. And those are the only 2. And then my deputy collector is allowed, but I have a separate bank account for him. So there are exceptions. And again, as the treasurer, you need to recognize those exceptions and see if they work within your town and within your limits.
So for our town, we have a split. I'm just a treasurer. We have a separate tax collector. So she does go to the bank with the tax collector. Payments that come in daily. But prior to COVID-19, one of the local banks in Milford opened a branch up in the high school. And part of them opening up the branch in the high school was to expose the students to go and they could work in internship at the branch in the high school. So with that said, we allowed our school lunch and community use department, since they were located in the high school, to make deposits directly. But they still had to come the same day with a turnover, but what they would provide would be the receipt that they got from the bank that was
From the
breaking out everything. On their turnover, it was still listed the same way. They had the account numbers, had cash in the checks broken out, but their backup was just the receipt. We did do our research. We got, our town council here researched it and made sure that we weren't violating any laws or breaking any laws. So it seemed to work out. It's still continuing now, even though COVID happened. They haven't reopened the branch within the high school, but the main office is right down the street from the high school. So the community use director and the school lunch director still go and make the deposits. They do it more than weekly. They're actually doing it. They do it daily. So I'm kind of fine with that. As things start to pick up and hopefully that bank opens their branch up, it can resume.
Okay, the next scenario is I am the town clerk. Chris is the treasurer. A resident came into my office and they paid for their dog license. They wrote me a check and they wrote it out to Georgia Kaliva's town clerk. So I go to Chris, I sign the check over, sign my name on the back. I gave it to Chris and I'm asking him to cash the check, and I'll just take the $10 and put it toward my receipts, toward my treasurer's receipts, my turn in. So what's wrong with the scenario? Couple of things wrong there. Yes, obviously the check should have been made payable to the town, but you know what? It came in through the mail. We didn't see it. Check came in through the mail with a dog registration through the mail. True, you don't have to accept it. That is correct. You shouldn't accept it, but I signed it over and I asked Chris for the $10. What is Chris going to tell me?
Yeah, it does look suspicious. It does look suspicious. So what I'm going to tell her is I'm going to be like, you did the right thing. You signed it over, but we're not going to give you cash in and give you the $10 back. We're just going to deposit directly into the bank. You can't sign there's a lot of Never cash a check is right. Call the
Never
resident.
cash a check,
Right.
never, even a payroll check. And no one should come in over your counter. You should never be cashing a check for anybody.
That's right. So that's some of the reasons. You can send it back. You can't sign the check. Chris should say no, right? I should say no. You always call the resident and ask for a new check.
Which
And
is
then
probably the
never-
best thing to do, because if they do it this year, they're gonna do it again next year. And that's one thing, you need to train everybody to your thinking and to your rules and your controls. Once you ask them to do it and to change it, then they won't make the mistake again. And it's really not a mistake, it's just a practice of how you do it. So those are our little scenarios, and I think we need to speed it up a little because we're
Yeah, we
running
will.
behind
We
here.
will.
We talk too much.
All right, so our next. So the collector's turnover, pretty much this, we'll kind of skip around here. We'll go through it fast. It's going to be exactly like a regular turnover, except if you're a collector treasurer, you're turning it over to yourself realistically. So you're not gonna worry about too much other stuff. And then on the collector side, you might have 50 general ledger accounts that you're breaking up your turnover to that comes in instead of 1 or 2 that a department does. So here's here's a sample of I don't know, this isn't the town of Milford's, and I don't think this is the town of Medfield's either. I think it was just used in a prior slide. So who gets the turnover sheets? We talked about this, the treasurer's office, and then the town accountant's or city auditor's office. The departments could keep a copy and they could use it for their internal tracking. They should turn over all receipts. No department should wait to turn over funds until they have $10 in quarters to roll or $25 bills to band. They should be weekly. The cash book. This is where the treasurer is going to record all the deposits coming in. They're going to record all the disbursements going out. So your payroll warrants, your AP warrants, any debt payments you have to do. It's all going to be recorded in this cash book. They are permanent records, so do not destroy your cash book. And it should show a breakout of all receipts, disbursements, and cash balances. You should have a reconciliation to the cash book to the bank statement, and then the cash book to the general ledger statement. So this is a sample of one of my cash books. This happens to be our online accounts for our school system, which is held at Unibank through Unipay. So this account is just a depository. No checks are ever written out of this account. No ACHs are ever taken out of this account. Before, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, the bank would actually reverse or refund a customer through, if they paid an ACH and they asked for a refund, they would do it. Now, especially with Unipay, they came back and asked us to put it on our warrant. I guess there was something with their auditors advised them that technically they were breaking the warrant process, and they were. By them refunding it, they were not getting authorization by the town select board or city mayor. That is the CEO when it comes to signing off on anything that can be paid out. So now what they do, if we have to refund someone, they send a letter to the representative that I have for each one at the school, and they will put it on the warrant, and then we'll pay it out by a check. So we'll never see a credit or a negative in these specific accounts again. And what I have here is you got the date. So from the 1st of December to 31st, I put the name of the bank, the account number, and this 4-digit code right here is actually the general ledger account number. So I have it here. Again, you have your dates, what it is, the deposits. If it was a payment, it'd be the AP or payroll. If it was a transfer to another bank account, it would say transfer. Then I have an interest line item here. I have an ending balance, what my bank statement says, and then what my general ledger says. And the variances are all zero on this. Sorry, got cut off at the bottom. If there was a variance, per se, like, I don't know, that one of the deposits was in timing, there's a plenty line items, plenty of space down here where it will just break it out. That's a timing issue. Deposit hit 1/1/2022. Georgia, do you have anything on
Mine
that?
is very similar. I did not send it to Chris over. If anybody wants to take a look at mine, I can email it to them, but it's very similar. And again, you have to do what works for your municipality. You have to do what works for your relationship with the town accountant. Everybody's is so different. Nothing is right, nothing is wrong. It's how it works for you. And keep in mind that your cash book, you can perfect it almost every month. Just keep in mind that your cash book has to be efficient to balance at the end of the month.
So, Georgia, you did send me yours. If you
Oh, I
want me to
did.
show it, or
Yeah, you can show it. That's fine.
Right.
So my sample cash book it's a Google spreadsheet. It's very simple. It's an Excel spreadsheet on Google. As the receipts come in, my staff or myself, no, that wasn't it. My staff or myself enter it as a shared document. And do you find it?
No.
All right, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So it's the date of the deposit, the source, sometimes the general ledger account number. My accountant is not a stickler about that. And then your total, the total equals the deposit slip. And then at the end of the month, all my receipts are already entered. So it's really easy. It's part of my monthly report. And then I plug in all the other revenues. That do not come in over the counter, whether it's school lunch, my turnovers from as tax collector, then your interest, your payables, your warrants, your payroll, your vendor. If anybody wants to take a look at it, I'd be more than happy to email you. We'll send out our emails at the end of the presentation. If anybody has any questions too, we'll be more than happy to answer them.
So we covered why they're important. It's a budgeting tool that the treasurer used to make sure that there's enough cash available for payroll and payable warrants. And then it needs to be done timely, so you know what's on hand at any given time. Auditors do look at your cash books. Some auditors will look at a couple of them. Some auditors will look at all 12 of them for the year or for the fiscal year. Bank reconciliations, you're required to make a bank reconciliation. They should be done monthly. You should be reconciling to the town accountant, city auditor. And then you really don't have to do anything after that, but you should keep it in a binder that's readily available in case anybody comes in looking to wanting to see it. It's a public record, so make sure it balances. And if you use an Excel, all your formulas tie, because you don't want someone coming in and finding an error. This is just another sample reconciliation. Sorry, it's a little hard to read, but this is from 2019. I'm not sure which town uses it, but pretty much the same. Gives the bank, the description, the balance, the receipts, the warrants, transfers in and out, then the ending balance, and then it gives the bank statement and if there was a difference or a variance. You're on your AP account and your payroll account, you're always going to have a variance because you're always going to have outstanding checks. So annual cash reporting. So the balance in each bank should be reported as of December 31st in the annual report every municipality prints out. This is for transparency. It allows your residents to see how the town is doing. There allows them to know, I guess, how fiscal responsible you are as well. You also have to provide a report to the Department of Revenue at the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. It's a year-end cash summary report. You prepare it, you sign it, and then the accountant or auditor has to sign it after they do it. Failure to, this is the biggest thing that sometimes delays cherry sheet reimbursements and free cash certification. Failure to submit these reports timely could delay your certification of free cash. And then if your certification of free cash is delayed, it's a trickle effect down there. You can't set your tax rate. If you can't set your tax rate, your town's not going to have revenue to come in. I did a couple of years ago in a town kind of further west of here, there was some turnover and within the accounts office and within the treasurer's office, and they did not submit their year-end reports. They didn't submit them until probably almost a year after. 6 months into that year, the state of Massachusetts withheld their local aid. So some towns rely on the local aid. You guys don't want to be responsible for having your local aid held up, because I'm sure people are going to be angry all over when we can't pay school teachers, firefighters, police department. You can't make payroll. You can't pay your vendors. So you guys, we have to make sure that these reports are filed timely. I believe you have until September 1st to file all three. There's 3 reports that you have to file.
So in my town, I do a quarterly cash statement, only because my accountant and I prefer it that way. If there's any, we balance cash every month. We take great pride in that. We balance cash every month timely. And I do a quarterly cash statement, and then on June 30th, everything gets entered into Gateway so that you can get your free cash. And it's very important that you are able to balance every month and you do it timely, because remember, the buck stops in our office. If free cash cannot get certified because you have failed to, do a report or you haven't balanced, it's a reflection on the treasurer and on the treasurer's staff.
So this is kind of the sample annual report. This is from our colleague, Joanne. This is what she does for her city of Charlton. It pretty much what it does, it just breaks out the balances by bank in your general fund and then in your trust and agency funds. This is the year-end report that we have to file with the state. It's going to add, it's couple of pages long and it's different sections. You're going to have a non-interest bearing checking account. You'll have an interest bearing checking account where you can see they listed all their banks, the purpose of the account, the interest rate, and the balance. Not so much, I don't think they really look at the interest rate, but there's what they're looking at, the balance and what it's for. Your liquid investments are your any CDs you have, any lockbox, enterprise fund, that stuff goes there. And then your trust funds are down here. You can't really see it, but your OPEB fund, your stabilization, you would list those balances. And it should tie out to your accountant's year-end report, because they also have to sign. If there's a variance, there's a section on the report, you can write a comment why there's a variance. Some common variances is that we had to void a check and it didn't clear until the following month. There was a deposit turned in on June 30th at 3 o'clock that the bank recognized came in too late. They posted it July 1. So things
Or
like that.
a vendor warrant payable. You run the
Yeah.
vendor warrant and you don't move the cash until July 1st.
Right.
There's always a timing difference.
Right.
And those, again, as Chris said, you just document them. And again, when you do all of this and you do your homework, when your auditors come in, it's a breeze, because you are able to show them that during the year, you have been prepared and that you work very closely with your accountant, I should say.
So I'm pretty sure this is the last slide. And it's just some helpful resources. Mass www.masscta.com is the Mass Collectors Treasurers Association website. There you'll be able to find the treasurer's manual as well as the collector's manual. You also, there's some other links there that will have resources for you. The Division of Local Services also has a municipal finance section, and they have all types of guides and tools there to help treasurer collectors, both seasoned, not new treasurer collectors and their staff. I advise you guys to jump on the Division of Local Services website and go through that. There's some good spreadsheets they have. I think they have a cash flow statement, a debt service statement, and it's all in Excel, so you can make it unique to your town.
Make it unique to your town. Yeah. And the last thing that I'm going to say, because I know we're crunching into people's lunchtime, we are very fortunate. We have a strong and dedicated group of treasure collectors. We have a very, very strong organization. And not only are we strong and we're many, but we are all willing to help one another. And as you can see, with our listserv, there's always a question or two every day, and people are so willing to give their help and their answers. We will put in, I'll put in my email if anybody has a question. I wish you all the best of luck, and keep counting.
That's right.
Great job, both of you. I'm gonna make an executive decision. I don't want to cut everyone off from having lunch, so we're gonna start. I emailed Ron that he'll start at 1, so you have the half hour. You did a great job, and I'm glad you didn't cut it short because there's so much really great information for our treasurers out there.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Don't forget to register for the conference in June. Beth will
That's
be
right.
sending out more information. It's a great source of information, and it's a great education in 3 days. It's jam-packed.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thanks.
I just decided to make it, Ron, if you don't
Yep,
mind, we'll
I'm
just
here.
start a little later
Not a problem.
because we just ended it. So is
Oh,
that
let
okay?
me test to make sure I can share screen. Oh,
Oh, I have to share your,
okay, yeah. I just want to make sure I can, and then I'll, I can put that presentation.